week, we have a very special guest, the main candidate of Florida's 65th district, Jake Hoffman. So before we bring Jake into the show, I'd like to play a clip of an interview he gave recently.
Yeah, so I had a state representative tell me this a couple of years back, and I thought it was really insightful. That there's two people up in Tallahassee. There's a representative that goes up there and tries to expand the government, that goes up there to try and keep the status quo. And then there are people that do get sent up there that are trying to do everything they can to possibly restrict the growth of the government. I'm running as a Republican, but I would happily classify myself as a libertarian, and I think you need to get more people in office that are of that mindset. And I'm 31. There's an entire different mindset of people that are my age of why they're Republican, what's brought them into the party. And for the most part, it's not some of the things we may have seen where my dad or my grandfather might have been a Republican. It's people who are very anti-government and very anti-government involvement in their lives, and these are people that even used to vote Democrat, and now they're, again, because of the pandemic, because of the vaccines, because of all of these different things, they have started to come to our side. And so we need to get those people into office, people that think that way, where they're trying to minimize the amount of government in their lives, not going up there to expand it or kick around bills that just move money from one person to another.
All right, now I'd like to welcome to the show Jake Hoffman.
Hey, how's it going? Great to see you.
Good. Hey, great to see you too. How's it going?
Things are going well. I'm off and running and campaigning.
All right, so let's jump in. I have a few questions for you. All right.
Okay.
All right. So to start off, so originally you didn't know what district you'd be running in because of redistricting. Uh,
Sure.
and Jackie Toledo was still making her mind up what to do. Now, I loved when you said, "I'm not dropping out. Wherever I run, I run." Uh, you originally would be running in a district that actually had more registered Democratic voters, and you actually put in $50,000 of your own money. So to me, that really shows, the belief that you have in your message. So take me through what that was like, not knowing what district you were going to be running in.
Yeah, and for people that aren't aware, if you're not paying as much close attention to politics as some of us are, we had a redistricting year, and everybody didn't know where they were running. Nobody knew what the maps were going to look like. Florida is actually one of the last in the nation to host a primary and thus get the maps out as well. So a lot of us were up in the air and up in limbo, but I happen to know that there's a lot of movement around here in Hillsborough County and around Tampa, and I knew that we were going to have a good chance at having a nice Republican district here. And so I got in, and, despite, what happens when you're a young person getting into office, which is a lot of people will sit around and tell you, don't get in, just wait your turn, all of that stuff. And my answer is simply no, right? It's the same mindset that I had going into running a business. Is like the old guard is going to tell you, don't do it, don't get in, just wait your turn, all of that stuff. And one of the things you realize is no, like you said, let's put $50,000 in. Let's tell people I'm running somewhere in Tampa whenever these maps get drawn. And now you've got to put me on a map and deal with me, not just kick me around and wait around for the maps to come out so you can put somebody else in, which is what happened eventually.
Yeah, I was looking at Ballotpedia, and you're the only name listed. So to me, it looks like a lot of people were trying to sit back and see where they could win, where you were just like, I'm in, bring it.
Exactly. And that's a lot of the digital marketing experience that I'm bringing into politics. For those of you that don't know, I run a digital media company. We work with professional athletes. We sell fitness programs, mostly for guys in the NFL, UFC, and boxing. And, we actually sell products on the internet. So I know what I'm doing here. And then when it comes to politics, like everything else with the government, they're 20, 30 years behind when it comes to digital marketing. So most candidates are not even going to have the thought cross their head to start working on their SEO, to start working on their website, to start working on things like Ballotpedia and all of that good stuff that people are going to look at and people are going to search for, because we live in a very digital age where people are going to try and find out the information about you, and you've got to make sure that you're out there.
So how does that work where you didn't know the map yet? Would you have had to move if you weren't in because originally I believe you would have been in the 62nd district, but you lived in the 60th district. Would you have had to move? Like how does that work?
So in a redistricting year, you don't actually have to live in the district that you're running in until the day of the election. So again, it's it's kind of my personality. It was a bet on myself, and it was a bet on that the districts were gonna play out in a way that I wanted them to, and they did at the end of the day. So yes, it could have went wrong, and I could have had to have technically moved by election day, but at least I would have known and had a 6 month or 8 month heads up. And a lot of these districts, when it comes to local state house races, you may be talking about only a couple of streets over having to
Right.
move,
Yeah.
and so that's the reality of it. Doesn't mean that you're moving. There was no intention of me ever moving to Jacksonville
Right.
or Orlando or something like that. It was just, let's figure out where the districts end up here in Tampa, because there's going to be a favorable one somewhere within, a 15-minute drive.
Excellent. All right. So next up, I know we now know Tampa as Champa Bay, which
Yeah.
the Florida Panthers, I think, are going to end that this year.
I don't know about that, but yeah.
True politician, right?
Yeah.
Go Lightning.
I I actually, to talk about that. I am from South Florida. I am from Palm Beach. I grew up as I'm still very much a Miami Heat fan. I'm a Miami Dolphins fan, and it's hockey. We didn't really grow up with a lot of hockey players in South Florida, so I wasn't really ever like looking at the Panthers. And when I came to Tampa, we have such a culture around the Tampa Bay Lightning that I have fully adopted them. I'm fully on the bandwagon. I've been over here for 13 years now, and I'm a huge Lightning fan. I love the Lightning, and I do like the Panthers. They're still my number two, but I'm siding with the Lightning now on this one, and I'm also fully on the bandwagon behind Tom Brady over here with the Bucks. I don't care who knows that I hated the guy, the Dolphins fan, my whole life, and I am right there to get behind him and line up on the bandwagon as soon as he came to Tampa, because he changed the culture of the city.
Well, I just see you guys having all these parades, and I kind of want one over here.
Yeah, we love our boat parades over here. That's for sure.
Yep, I have a Boca Raton behind me. I thought you'd appreciate that.
I do. I do. I think you guys would be prime for a boat parade. But you you need the Dolphins to win something.
You need a
And
team. You need a team before you can have a parade.
exactly, you have to at least start winning some playoff games somewhere.
So my question to you is, what makes Tampa unique? What makes it special?
Well, right now, a lot of things. I mean, we are the boom town in the entire country. I mean,
Yep.
you have a major metropolitan area that was, to be honest, very, very underutilized and underinvested in for a long time. And if you look back at the skyline of downtown Tampa here 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, 13 years ago, when I moved here, it looks nothing like what it does today. And it's not going to look like what it's going to in 3 years. You have so much investment here. You have people moving here, young people moving here. Axios just called me up for an interview a couple weeks ago because they named Tampa, through a study, the number one destination for young Republicans coming out of college. This is it's pretty crazy to hear, because people are still kind of like, why Tampa? What's going on in Tampa? And at the end of the day, you've got a major metropolitan. It's getting quickly more expensive, but it's still significantly cheaper than living in San Francisco or New York or one of these big cities, or even Miami. People are leaving Miami and Palm Beach and South Florida and coming over to Tampa because there's more opportunity here and it's cheaper. And all of those things combined, and then now you add in, over the last 2 years, the pandemic situation. Everybody wanted to move to Florida because we were open and you were allowed to live your life. And so there's no denying that the way that Governor DeSantis handled the pandemic is the reason why this is such a desirable state. Tampa's a major metropolitan area that still has plenty of room for growth and boom. So that's why Tampa is unique right now.
Yeah, it's impressive to me how we've known it to be a number one destination for young people, but also for retirees. So I mean, everybody wants a piece of Tampa. Everybody wants to go down there. I've noticed it in South Florida. It's not snowbirds anymore. They're just birds. They're just down here. They didn't go back anywhere. They're here to stay. And like you
Yeah.
said, because of DeSantis and because of the way Florida stayed open, but also looked out for the elderly first, like the governor has said. So he protected people, but he also kept the state open, and now everybody wants to be here in Texas.
Yeah, and you cannot discount the fact that we don't have a state income tax as
Right.
well. I mean, that's always been a draw for people coming down to Florida, but it makes a lot of sense when you're getting taxed like crazy, inflation's going crazy, all of these things. You're like, why am I going to pay another 40% my income tax? And the fact that you can work remotely is another big factor in that too. So if you're able to work remotely, and make 40% more of your money, why would you not do it on a beach instead of doing it in Minnesota? I mean, it's just it's simple kind of decision making for me, but maybe it takes people a little bit longer, and that's why we have so many people here now.
Yeah, absolutely. The news loves to rag on Florida, but yet everybody wants
Mhm.
to be here. So try to figure that out.
Yeah, I've got a great article about, that we were the butt of the jokes, for so many years. But at the end of the day, the Florida men are having the last laugh because, we actually have made a lot of sense throughout this whole pandemic. As crazy as everybody thinks we are.
Yeah, yeah. I think we're the best state in the country, honestly.
Absolutely.
We are the melting pot. Florida's melting pot. All right, so
Yes.
yeah. The next one. I was reading before our interview. I did my research. I was reading up on you, and I agree with what you said. That it's the conservatives now that have a message of no unnecessary wars and are fighting for freedom of speech. I actually have a political cartoon that I think sums up what you said in that interview. So I'm just gonna put up that this cartoon here. All right. So it shows on the left kind of the hippie generation back then, and then on the right it shows how the same person is today. So on the left you had people fighting for free love and free speech, and now those same people are fighting to obey the establishment and are basically running the cancel culture and shutting people down. So my question there is, what is a millennial conservative to you?
So this is actually one of my favorite things to talk about because I've been saying this for years now, and I've really confused a lot of reporters when I talk to them about it. I remember telling this story to a woman who was a host of a PBS NewsHour a few years back, and I told them, I said, my father was a hippie. He was at Woodstock. He was not political. He was everything that you saw in that in that cartoon in 1969, right? And then I'm running the Tampa Bay Young Republicans, and older people who have this notion of what a Republican is supposed to look like look at me and go, "How in the heck did you become a Republican when your father was a hippie?" And I said, "It's really not different a mindset at all, especially when you think about, like, again, I consider myself a little bit of a libertarian, like I said earlier in one of the other clips, that you don't want the government to come and interfere with your life. We have believed in gay marriage our entire lives. Again, I'm 31. I've never been against gay marriage a day in my life, which Obama, Biden, Hillary Clinton, none of them can say that. And that was the kind of stuff the hippies were pushing for. We are becoming more and more pro marijuana and recreational marijuana and things like that. There are some of these issues that were really core to what some of the hippies believed in the 60s, and now you have a generation that we have become counterculture. And I've been saying this now we're rebelling against the establishment because, like you saw, the CDC is telling us what to do, Big Brother's telling us what to do. We don't trust the CIA, we don't trust the FBI, we don't trust all of these major institutions that are telling us what we know to be untrue, because of the fact that over the past couple of decades, with the invention of the internet and all of the research you can go back and do it, how all of these institutions have lied to us over the past so many decades, that why would we believe them now? Why in 2022 should we sit back and believe them? And so it is a very, very strange reversal of roles between the parties and the people that are in the parties. But right now, when I go around, I'm our state committee man for the Young Republicans. I'm going to be in Arizona this weekend with representatives from every single state in the country who are Young Republicans, which is defined as under 40, and every one of them are some version close to the way that I believe as well. This isn't just a unique thing with just me, with just Tampa, with just Florida. The younger version of the Republican Party is getting pulled to this, what would be considered a little bit more progressive, which is kind of a strange way of explaining it, but that is what's happening. And then on the left, young people, they don't have young Democrats anymore in colleges. They have young socialist clubs. They have young communist clubs. Like, this isn't something I'm just making up. It's not just like the scare tactic, like people seem to think that it was. If you go onto a college campus right now, you have young Republicans who are somewhere, what I consider pretty moderate in the middle on a lot of their views, and you have people on the left, younger people on the left, that are full blown socialist and even admittedly communist. And so that's the difference right now. And so, my beliefs haven't changed. Most people's beliefs haven't changed, but the demographics coming in of the younger generation are so far left that most Democrats who are, let's say, 50 years and older probably have a lot more in common than a young Republican who's 20 years old than they do a 20-year-old young Democrat.
I absolutely, I agree 100%. It's interesting. Bill Maher, there's times where I like
Mhm.
some things he says. Sometimes I don't like some of the things
Sure.
he says. But it's interesting how he can be so far to the left at times. But then right now, he's angry at the cancel culture and that people can't make jokes. And he talked about George Carlin, how George Carlin continued to go to the colleges because he felt that's where the free speech was. And now the
Mhm.
same profession, comedians are saying we won't go to the colleges
Yep.
anymore because that's not where the free speech is. So it's interesting that sometimes people villainize conservatives or Republicans, and they fight it. But then when it turns on them, they go, now I see why freedom's important. Now I see why freedom of speech is important. When the mob, turns on you, it's a whole different feeling than when you're part of it. Tying into that'll kind of lead into my next question.
Mhm.
uh, you went to CPAC, correct?
Yes.
This year. Uh, so the mainstream media, I think, likes to make it sound like a Klan rally. So what was it really like?
So I wrote an entire article about this as well, which is kind of the media distortion of what CPAC actually is. If you go to CPAC, you will meet people of all kinds of different persuasions, ethnicities, culturally very, very different people. But you know what the media actually does? They spent more time talking about a rally that got held by some crazy, alt-right person. I forget the guy's name. He's like, just a troll, and he held something nearby to CPAC. There are more articles written about that. Something that I was there for a weekend, never even heard about. But if they can take somebody who's openly anti-Semitic or openly racist or any of those things and be like, they were there, that's all of them, right? No, there's tens of thousands of people there over the weekend, and what you end up seeing is that all of it's a younger crowd. CPAC was originally supposed to be for college students, and that's still generally what they try and cater to. But you have people, most people are talking like I do, right? You're having conversations about things like cryptocurrencies, right? That's a huge issue right now amongst young people that are sitting around at CPAC on how that's going to be dealt with. There are people that are talking, obviously, there's still a lot of people that like Trump. I think that there's even more people that like DeSantis in those rooms, because especially when it's being held in Orlando. And at the end of the day, CPAC is not this, Klan rally that they make it out to be. I'm always really surprised, and I've run the Tampa Bay Young Republicans here for the last 4 years. We're one of the largest clubs in the nation. We won the best club in the entire nation in 2020. We won an award for it. And one of the things that happens is we end up doing events every month at like bars, right, or restaurants or things like that. And then there's always staff in there that is tends to be on the left, maybe a bartender or something like that, or somebody that gets dragged there from their friend who's like, I don't know if I really want to go to this. And then they come and they listen to us, and they always say the same thing. They go, this isn't what I was expecting. I was expecting it to be much different. And I'm always like, what did you expect? You think a bunch of Republicans like come and sit in a bar in the middle of Tampa and like put on white hoods and sit around and plan like our next lynching? Like, it's wild. Like, no, you have a bunch of very normal people, regular, usually business class type of people who are getting themselves involved, that are politically thoughtful, politically nuanced, getting together because they have something in common, that they're on the right, but they don't have a place to express that. And so, we have to do a better job of being outwardly Republican and talk about this kind of stuff, because for so long we were, the silent majority. And right now, they try to keep it that way with the media. They try and make any affiliation with the Republican Party very, very dangerous to be affiliated with. You see that with January 6th, right? This is a group of people who were, let's say a couple hundred, couple thousand people, that they're now painting 70 million people who voted for Trump as insurrectionists. That's wild, right? There's an attempt to tie us to the absolute worst in our party, and that's just not the reality of what it actually is.
You know, I feel the same way. And I'm kind of, the show's not about my views, but I try to run the show. I try to respect all different, opinions. But one thing that I feel like is proof of the bias of the media is that people have that distortion of what Republicans and conservatives are. I mean, to me, that's the proof. And what I find offensive, even though that word is thrown around too often, is like you said, Republicans will get tied to by the media the worst of their party, while Democrats, if you have Bill Clinton do many terrible things, never get tied to any of that. And I think that's the double standard in the media, that there's so many good conservatives that are out there, especially like you and people in the state governments and the Senate and Congress people. But presidential politics is a whole other beast, and people forget that there's so much diversity within the party that isn't just one man or one.
Yeah, I often tell my Democratic colleagues that, or Democratic voters, if you're mad at the Republican Party, you're usually mad at somebody over 80 years old who's white and then sitting in Washington D.C. That is not the same as somebody who's young, 30 years old, and grew up in South Florida. We're different people with different beliefs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that young Republican is up to 40 because I'm 39. So
There you go. You're welcome at any of the meetings.
I didn't know I'm still a young Republican. So
Yep.
All right. Or well, let's move on. So.
Yeah.
All right. So Orrin Hatch passed away last week. He was known as a staunch conservative. He was also known for working and being friends with Democrats like Ted Kennedy. You don't really see people working together like that today. So my question, are you too nice for today's politics?
I don't know if I'm too nice for today's politics because but what I will tell you is something that is a very real truth. And people like to think that our country is split with right and left. And we're definitely split on a lot of different lines. But I can tell you, again, running the Tampa Bay Young Republicans for 4 years, I have reached across the aisle more times than I can count to try and get something done. I could try and get a beach cleanup done. I could reach out to the young Democrats here and say, I want to do a beach cleanup and do something bipartisan. They will not talk to us. They will not interact with us. They will not do shows with us. They will not sit down and do a forum with us or debate with us. They do not want to be associated with us at all. And when I see it all the time. I'm not sure. I don't pay as much attention to local politics down in South Florida, but I see it in Tampa here. If a Democratic city councilman goes over to a right-wing group to speak, the Democrats destroy him. Why are you talking to all these people? Why are you talking to those insurrectionists, racists, this, that? And they get lambasted online. They get lambasted on Twitter, which is usually fake, as we're coming to find out. And they are scared into submission of not even having a conversation with us, which is totally the opposite for Republicans. I'm more than willing to go sit down at any Democrats group and go express my ideas and we can argue through our ideology on certain issues and everything. But the reality is that the left does not want to engage, and they don't believe in civilized debate anymore. They don't believe in, and again, even talking to us or even having a conversation. That's why they try so hard to shut down conversation online, is because if we actually had to talk about things, then maybe they'd have to stay ideologically consistent. But unfortunately, that's just not the reality we live in. And they've done such a good job of making a Republican so toxic as a brand that a lot of people just don't even want to touch it. And Democrats don't even want to touch it because they'll get, it's the same reason why, people were telling, the presidential candidates during the last presidential election, don't go on Fox News. Why not? Why would you not go talk to the other 50% of the country? And so that's a totally wrong mindset that, I think it's totally against free speech. I think it's totally against the idea of bipartisanship. And, I don't know if I'm too nice to answer your questions. I just think that on the right, we tend to be the ones that are reaching out, and then the left are the ones usually shutting the door.
Well, I grew up in, upstate New York, and upstate New York's an interesting place because it kind of leans probably to the left, but it's not liberal. Upstate, They say the more upstate in New York you get, the more north you go, the more south you get.
Yeah.
New York. And, I kind of grew up with the mentality that the Republicans were the mean ones. They were they didn't care about people. Democrats cared about teachers and,
sure.
and women and everybody. And then when I moved to West Virginia, and again, I'm not here to villainize any groups, but the Republicans were the ones helping me fix my tire. They were the ones that if my tire was out, they would come and not just tell me it was out, but would put air in it for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I met all these great Republicans there, and I'm like, I don't think these stereotypes are true.
Mm-hmm.
So at the same time, though, I think politics does get kind of nasty, and I think that it's interesting because the American public, I think, want they don't want all this all these insults and screaming and arguing. They want uh, level-headed people. But for some reason, during the primaries, sometimes these uh, these ugly commercials sometimes they get votes, even though it's like the American public say they want one thing, but then sometimes they go with the other thing. So
Well, I think, it's something that in our culture, maybe it's just in human DNA that we like to see conflict. We kind of like to watch the blood sports. At the end of the day, it's something people watch, reality TV all day, right? They watch really bad TV. Why do they do that when they know it's bad for them and kind of mind numbing because it's entertaining? People watch like the Housewives show where they're throwing drinks at each other and fighting and stuff like that. Yeah, I think that a lot of people in a survey would tell you they want to see politics be nice, but I think people
right,
can't turn away from a fight.
yeah, because I think you are, I said Florida is America, and I think you're America. I think Americans are, uh, you know, fiscally conservative, and then on a lot of social issues, they want people to have their freedom,
Sure,
and like you said, libertarian for me is hard to. I kind of define myself in that realm of a libertarian, but sometimes I feel more moderately conservative or independent, so I kind of
sure.
go in between those. But I think when it comes down to it, that's where America is, and I think your views and your values are right there with America. And
And I think it's also, like I said, it's a generational thing, like I've talked about before. I think that our generation, we have a hard time defining libertarian. That term's kind of thrown around a little bit, and people don't really know what I'm talking about. But when you start talking about just government not being involved in what you're doing, it is such a big overarching theme of where we are. And I think that is what Americans want. And you saw that during the pandemic. There were other countries where that were like, please, government regulate us, where we have this like inherent thing that goes all the way back to 1776 where we're like, no, government shouldn't be able to tell us what to do. We have this spirit amongst us where we're like, we just want to run our businesses, leave us alone while we run our businesses. We want to have, freedoms to do whatever we want. And we, rank freedom higher and higher than anything else, where there are other cultures and other societies where they don't rank freedom as high. They rank, safety or some of these other things higher. And the more, that we stray away from the freedom, the more dangerous that I think we get into when you start talking about like higher, political philosophy of allowing for things like authoritarians and socialism and communism and all these other things that, have been thrown around for a long time. But at the base, we really believe in freedom. I think most Americans do believe in the idealism of freedom, but again, there's been like a slow breakdown over the past couple of years where people are willing to give up their freedoms.
well, I like that you're willing to fight for what you believe in, and you don't just go by the pollsters. When they said that talking about election fraud is not it's not popular with the voters. It's not, the polls are showing that's not a good issue. And in an interview, you said, well, if we don't fix this, then nothing else matters. If the election integrity isn't there, what else? Then where are we at? So I thought that was a great thing that you did. That you helped, and thank you for doing it. I mean, you helped strengthen Florida's election. So even though there's all this, people want to label people as conspiracy theorists, or they, like you said, they want to villainize that part of the political spectrum. I mean, the fact
Mhm.
of the matter is, election integrity is important. There is
Yeah.
vital, not just important, it's vital. And you made a great point in an interview talking about how this is not people being super geniuses that are hacking voting machines. It's a matter
Mhm.
of, hey, here's a swing county. Let's give these mail-in ballots to Democrats, and let's go collect those same ballots that people have never gotten before. And hey, let's give 4 million to the election. Uh, what is
Supervisor of elections. Yeah.
the supervisor
Yeah,
election?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I think that it's a really big issue to it's one of my favorite issues to talk about as well. After the 2020 election, it's exactly what you were saying. I talked to a lot of Republicans in the state of Florida, and I said, "What are we going to do about election integrity? There's clearly a problem here. Everybody thinks that there's a problem. Even Democrats, understand that there were inconsistencies and that this election was unprecedented." And like you said, I don't think that China was coming in and changing the votes, digitally or something like that. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I'm a complete realist, and you have to track back to like how this works. And it's a really simple formula that was used in the 2020 election. You mail out votes to everybody in the country, despite whether they know that they're getting it or not. $400 million was, verifiably given to supervisor of elections all over the country, specifically in swing districts. They use that money, here in Hillsborough County, we had $4 million go to our supervisor of elections. The records show it was given to a marketing company. The marketing company spent it on collecting ballots. And then they call it curing ballots. And so advertising, calling, making sure that you turn in ballots. Well, they're doing that in the Democratic zip codes, right? I don't want an audit of the election to, show me like where the votes were counted or they were counted wrong or something like that. I want an audit of where the money was spent, right? I want to know that you evenly spread your collection efforts amongst all the zip codes in the county, and I can guarantee you that it absolutely was not. And you only focused on people who were Democrats. So these are basic things that I really thought when I was writing a petition up to the state of Florida that through the Young Republicans to try and change some of these rules, that this would be a bipartisan thing that we can get along with, right? I don't believe that Democrats would like it if the Trump organization gave $400 million to supervisor of elections. I think they'd be out protesting in the streets. So I think it's safe no matter what side you're looking at. I think it should be bipartisan, but it's become something that's not because, again, it was labeled racist, right? I just listened to a federal judge come and say that the bill that I wrote the original petition for is illegal because it was racist, right? And that was banning drop boxes, that was banning unsolicited mail-out ballots and private donation to supervisor of elections. And I'm like sitting there looking at this like some federal judge in DC who's saying that like Florida's racist for enacting this law. And I'm like, I wrote the original petition. I'm like, you don't do this to stop Black people from voting. You're doing this because the way that we did our voting was unsafe. I found out and through doing this that in Washington D.C. you're not even allowed to. Or sorry, well, not Washington D.C. Washington State. You're not even allowed to vote in person anymore. It is 100% mail out ballots all the time, no in person voting. I don't trust the election that's coming out of Washington State if that's how you're doing things. That touches too many hands. It's not a safe way. There's no a store of record of any of this stuff. And so, some of the things that I was also talking about was trying to incorporate blockchain technology where you actually have a public ledger of all of the votes that go in. And I know it's a very complicated concept to try and go into right now, but these are the kind of things that I'm pushing for that I think that are pivotal, and they're being used in other countries to help secure their elections where everybody knows there's a real problem and where they're being used as solutions to solve their elections. Why are we not using some of those things here in America? And I really absolutely abhor the idea that this is a racist concept, that we don't want to have private money going to supervisor of elections to send out mail out ballots and things like that. It has absolutely nothing to do with race.
I knew somebody who had a friend in Estonia, and they talked about how their voting system was all very organized. People would even vote, online, I think, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's all technological. I don't know if that's the solution, because I actually like that we have all our states have different ways of doing it, so that one company can't dominate the whole system. So I actually
Sure.
like, even though people like to mock America for having all these separate voting systems in different states, I actually think that is a strength for us.
I think it's a fundamental, core value of America. The fact that Democrats were trying to federalize the election law for the last couple of years it is the scariest thing that they have done. And I know people don't seem to think that it is, but when you federalize election law, you are now taking the power out of 50 different states and you're putting it under one party, one man's rule, and you will never get another party in charge ever again. That is how takeovers happen in countries. And so absolutely 100%, it's the most important issue that exists in the country today, is that you make sure that all of the states have their own rules and are in charge of their own elections, and then we do the things that we need to do to strengthen them.
Absolutely. I think the main things I would like to see fixed are, at least in the presidential primaries, or where you have these states where they're counting peanuts or flipping coins for a tie in the caucuses.
Yeah.
That we probably could, maybe do something.
That's an interesting one. We do decide some by coin flips. It's pretty rare, but it does happen. It's in law somewhere.
in those small districts, it's
Yeah.
amazing what is still on the books. But again,
Yeah,
that makes us America, I think.
absolutely.
I wouldn't want to lose that coin flip. I don't know. Would you be happy to lose? I don't think you'd want to
I
lose.
would I would be pretty mad if I lost on a coin flip because we tied.
All right, so we're getting to the end here. I just want to touch two more things here. Uh, you ran the Young Republicans, and you had 10 members. You brought them from 10 members in 2018 to, my understanding, 250 members today.
We are at 375 as we speak today.
How did you do that?
I took what I know how to do, like I've been talking about, is digital marketing. I knew how to go out and get people and attract young people to the party. Young Republican groups around the country, as much as I love the organization, it honestly is they're not the most exciting groups. They're not the most effective groups. The same thing with the GOP locally in a lot of these counties. They're not exciting to go to. So how do you make it exciting for young people? Well, you go to a bar and you make it something fun, you make it something cool, and you make it something hip, and you use marketing to make it so that people actually want to go. And then you incorporate politics alongside of that instead of politics being the main driver for it. So it was a lot of that. And then it's a lot of staying consistent and being dedicated like anything else. Like, if you put out an event every single month and everybody knows like that's a really fun thing for me to be at every month, they're going to keep going. And then you actually take on political fights around the city, then that gets people feeling like they're actually doing something. When you're writing legislation that ends up getting enacted by a state representative or a state senator that's taking on some of your ideas, you feel like you're actually being involved. And so if you just, it starts to snowball like anything else. It's like starting a company, and then all of a sudden, 5 years down the line, you're like, oh, we've grown quite a bit, and it happens fast.
Yeah, I think I saw somewhere where you said, "I'm tired of writing articles. I want to start writing bills," or something like that.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I've spent a lot of time writing articles and writing petitions and trying to get politicians to do the things that we're asking them to do. It's just time to just go in and do it and write the laws.
Yeah, and I think it's great showing young people and people in general how empowering that is to be part of the system rather than to sit back and just complain, "Oh, things are so bad," or "Things are so polarized." Well, change it, make it good,
Yeah,
make
yeah.
it.
I had this argument with a lot of my friends that are very just disillusioned with the system, right? Where they're like, America's broken, two-party system. I hate it. There's a lot of people that just don't even want to deal with politics, and I don't think you get to complain and throw rocks at the house. I think you need to be inside of it. You need to change things. And so, when I was getting involved with the Young Republicans, I had a lot of Democratic friends who were like, "What the heck are you doing, getting involved with the young, Republican Party like that? They believe this, they believe that. I can't believe you would stand for that." Well, maybe I don't agree with, like I said, I'm pro gay marriage. 10 years ago, that wasn't the case for the Republican Party at all. And you look at it and you go, okay, well, I believe in all of these other things that the Republican Party stands for. I don't like this one thing. How do we go in and change this one thing? Right? If that's your sticking point, how do you go in and change this one piece of the Republican Party? And then you've seen it. Now you've seen that the change happens and the generation starts to change. But we don't need I don't need to go join the Democratic Party, and for me it seems like I got to change like 90% of their platform, not 5% of their platform or 10% of their platform. Like, I'm not changing my stance on the Second Amendment. I'm not changing my stance on government being involved in my life. Those are fundamentally Republican platform issues, things like that. And so there's pieces of it that I don't like. You have to get involved, and that's how the party evolves. And you're seeing there's a reason why there's going to be a huge red wave this year. It's because the messaging has finally picked up. Especially here in Florida with DeSantis and Trump to a lesser extent, they were able to tap into the way that people were feeling about cancel culture and woke culture and all of these other things. And finally, we had Republicans who were actually standing up for these things and talking about it instead of sitting kind of quietly by and being empty suits. And that's exactly what we don't want. We don't want empty suits. And you know what? Young people like to watch the internet. They like to see
Yeah,
characters, and they need people who are going to be energetic and entertaining for them to watch. And I'm going to give them a show while we run.
awesome. All right, so then I just want to ask you here, just to as we wrap it up. You know, I love that you consistently talk about the importance of authenticity.
Yeah.
And that's an important thing to me. When somebody says I'm genuine, I consider that to be the highest compliment. Uh, and then that you don't do what's always popular or what the polls are telling you to do.
Mhm.
So you said that you stood up for your rights at a young age. So what did you mean by that? What was it that really kind of lit this fire for you to stand up for what you believe in and what you think's right?
Yeah, I think that, first off, people don't want to hear the old style of politicians that come out there with a prepared speech and tell you, whisper sweet nothings. And that's, to be honest, what I see a lot of Joe Biden doing, right? He gets up there and if he can, coherently say a sentence, it's a very nicely prepared speech. That's why Trump won, because Trump came out and just said whatever he felt. It was refreshing to finally have a politician speak normally and speak to people and just kind of fire from the hip. People are done with prepared inauthentic politicians. So you need to be real and you need to know what you're actually talking about, because I see it now, locally. I see it, at the state level and all of those places where you have people who are still trying to go in and do that old style of politics where they don't really believe these things. They're not really going up there because they care about anything, and it doesn't resonate with people anymore. You need to be authentic, and it's the same thing on the internet. It's the same thing with companies. You can't fake your beliefs. You have to be authentic, and there's too much media attention on it to not be able to do that. And when it comes to what you're talking about with defending my beliefs and going against what's popular, the examples that I like to use is that when I took over the Young Republicans in 2018, we had something called Amendment 4 going on here in the state of Florida. That was to extend felon voting rights to felons who didn't commit murder and didn't commit any sex crimes after they get out of prison, so they can vote again. Fundamentally, again, I haven't changed. I believe that you have a constitutional right to vote in this country, and if you're out of prison and you've served your time and you've done your sentence, then you deserve to be able to vote. That is a very clear belief of mine. But the Republican Party didn't believe in it at the time, and so I was the only group that took a stance from the right and said, no, we're going to go join the left on this and say, we're going to make sure that people can vote, because I don't care if it ends up with more Democrats being, registered to vote. And, spoiler alert, it didn't. We actually had 70% of felons that have registered to vote in this state are actually Republican. Nobody has any idea that that's a real stat, but all of the felons that are coming out of prison and registering to vote are Republicans. Not all, but a good portion of them, a lot more than they were expecting, from the data. And that's why Republicans were against it, not on principle, because they thought that they were going to lose more elections. So I took the party all the way over, over here, and we were credited with passing that bill in the state of Florida. And I actually have a podcast coming out with another national syndicate that wants to talk about that, because it was a very pivotal piece of legislation. And then it became a whole other fight where they called it racist and not racist. Again, it got blown up into something that it wasn't. But originally, that was the goal of it. Then when you look at like the elections, it's the same thing. I stood on principle and I brought the party that was looking at the polling and saying, oh, we don't want to touch election integrity. But that's what the base wanted, because the base understood what happened, and then your constituents actually understood what happened. So I feel like I brought the party a little bit more right. And so it's about staying genuine and principled in what you're doing. Whether it's going to bring the party left, bring it right, bring it down the middle, whatever it is. If you're doing the right thing and you actually stand for what you're believing in, and you are able to coherently express why and explain the argument, then people appreciate that, even if they disagree with you.
I could not agree with you more there. And thank you so much for doing this and being on the show.
Yeah,
Really,
thanks for having me. I know we went probably a little bit over what we planned on, but I'm you get me started, and I kind of am becoming a politician. I talk a little bit passionately and too much about some of these issues.
right. It's part of the job, right?
Yeah,
Well, like I said, thank you. And me and my wife expect to be invited to the victory party when you
we
win.
will let you know. We have a primary August 23rd. It's a Republican primary. We have other people in this primary who are not in it for the right reasons, that are funded by special interest. This is going to be a Republican seat. I'm 100% convinced of it. So we need to make sure that you elect a right Republican in this district. And so if you're sitting in South Tampa right now watching this, make sure that you vote for me in August during the primary. And then if you're not, and people that are over here, you send them this video and send them my website and things like that, and be like, hey, there's this pretty interesting guy that's running over in your district, and make sure that we get me through the primary.
Well, thank you, and good luck, Godspeed. And that was a tough tackle this week. We'll see you all next week.
Have a good one.
And so I think the question is we can either have a free society or we can have a biomedical security state. And I can tell you, Florida, we're a free state. People are going to be free to choose to make their own decisions about themselves, about their families, about their kids' education, and about putting food on the table. And Joe Biden suggests that if you don't do lockdown policies, then you should, quote, get out of the way. But let me tell you this, if you're coming after the rights of parents in Florida, I'm standing in your way. I'm not going to let you get away with it. If you're trying to deny kids a proper in-person education, I'm going to stand in your way, and I'm going to stand up for the kids in Florida. If you're trying to restrict people, impose mandates, if you're trying to ruin their jobs and their livelihoods and their small business, if you are trying to lock people down, I am standing in your way, and I'm standing for the people of Florida. So why don't you do your job? Why don't you get this border secure? And until you do that, I don't want to hear a blip about COVID from you. Thank you.